can't reach it. Michaels going up again. Michaels down. Can he do it? Yes. No. He can't do it. He can't do it. Michaels down. Beside himself. Look at this. Can he do it this time? Razor starting to move. And he got it. He got it. He got it. Wow. Wait a minute. Look at Razor.
Hello, my name is Bob Bamber and welcome to the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. We're going back in the time machine to August of 1995 for Volume 1 of this month's show. Volume 2 is WCW looking at the Clash of the Champions. Volume 3 is a dual episode looking at the IWA Japan King of the Deathmatch final and also all your ECW action. And Volume 4 is a special look at the New Japan Pro Wrestling Collision in Korea show, which WCW do try and kind of clean on the back on. But we're here in Volume 1 to discuss WWF, largely looking at Summerslam. I'm being joined firstly by Jeff Parker. Jeff, hello.
Hello.
And Tom Martyn.
Hello, Bob.
Jeff, kick us off with the news.
All right, so the big news of the week, or the month, is Shawn Michaels and Ramon turned back the clock about 18 months with a show-stealing ladder match at SummerSlam this month. Interestingly enough, the plan at the beginning of the month of August was actually Shawn, it was calling for Shawn to face Sid at the pay-per-view, but there were obviously many fears that the show might be low on in-ring quality, which forced the change. Shawn and Razor went over 25 minutes, with Razor playing the heel for the better part of it, and Shawn sold his leg for most part of the match before retaining the belt in a great match.
The other big story of the month concerns the man Shawn defeated for the title in July, Jeff Jarrett. It's said that on July 30th, Jarrett and Vince McMahon had a 2-hour phone conversation, which seemed to iron out most of their issues. But after McMahon misunderstood a joke made by Jarrett, who reportedly told him, "Okay, asshole, you'll know how I feel in the future. Things have broken down." It's said that the odds on Jarrett returning are less than 5%. As for the roadie, while it's not confirmed, there are numerous reports that he failed a drug test at the show and won't be returning.
Otherwise at SummerSlam, we saw Diesel defeat Mabel in the main event, Bret the Hitman Hart defeat Isaac Yanchem DDS by disqualification, and Bertha Faye defeat Alondra Blaze in the women's world title match. Barry Horowitz continued his streak against Bodydonna Skip after a distraction from the newly babyface Hakushi, who defeated the 1-2-3 Kid in the opening match of the show. Elsewhere on the card, there were wins for Hunter Hearst Helmsley and the Smoking Guns.
There were two major stories on WWF television this month. The first was the debut vignette of Dustin Rhodes playing a character called Goldust, dressed entirely in gold with gold-coloured skin and dark makeup. His character is apparently meant to be a real-life version of an Oscar award. The second was the first time heel turn for the British Bulldog, who turned on Diesel during the main event of Raw on August the 21st.
So there's some news on some WWF departures for you to know this week, or this month. Firstly, Adam Bomb quit the company after a meeting with Vince McMahon. He was unhappy with the direction of his character and being asked to lose to an injured Henry Godwinn in 30 seconds at a live event. Second, there are unconfirmed reports at this stage that Lex Luger gave in his notice at tapings this month. Also, Jim Ross is on his way out of the company yet again, apparently joking while doing commentary on syndicated shows that he was deemed, quote, too regional.
The lawsuit of jobber Chuck Austin, who last year won $26.7 million in a case against the WWF, was settled quietly out of court this month. It's said that the eventual settlement came to $10 million, which will be paid by WWF's insurance company. It's said that both the WWF and WCW will be more selective about which jobbers they use as a result. Raw will be off the air until September the 11th, preempted for 2 weeks. It's said that there is no truth to the rumours that their 11th show will be headlined by Bret Hart against Shawn Michaels in what will be the first head-to-head show against WCW Monday Nitro.
We start Raw on the 7th of August with the rematch of the tag title match between Yokozuna and Owen Hart against Razor Ramon and Savio Vega that was still going on when the last Raw went off the air. Yokozuna pinned Vega in this one. In the main event, Diesel pinned at Sir Mo. Mabel came out to attack Diesel. Shawn Michaels followed, but Mabel ended up ramming Shawn into the ring post. On to August the 14th, we have Ted Dibiase on commentary, temporarily replacing Joe Lawler because Lawler's having a match tonight. Dibiase says that Henry Godwin isn't a member of the corporation, he was merely cheap labour. Godwin came out after the break and got in Dibiase's face. Dibiase ended up on his knees, but Godwin still dumped a load of pig slop all over him. We then see the debut of Goldust, the character being played by Dustin Rhodes. Goldust sees Dustin essentially as a cross-dresser, wearing a long blonde wig and being coloured entirely in gold, including his skin. He essentially seems to be dressed as an Oscar award, underscored by his promo being the cut on the backdrop of a movie studio. He name drops Diesel. Dean Douglas bores us all to tears in another score report segment, giving Bret Hart an F grade for failing to hook the leg during a pinfall. In the main event, Shawn Michaels and Jerry Lawler finished after interference by Sid. Sid entered the ring with Michaels' Intercontinental title belt and started attacking him. Sid went to chokeslam him, but Razer came out and stopped him before he and Michaels grabbed opposite ends of the belt. Razer yanked it away from Michaels and Diesel came out to play Peacemaker. On to August the 21st, Undertaker defeated Tatanka. Vince McMahon interviewed Diesel mid-ring, previewing his SummerSlam match. The British Bulldog came out and said that he needed a tag team partner tonight as Lex Luger wasn't there. During the match against Men on a Mission, Bulldog clotheslined Diesel, turning heel for the first time in his career. Backstage, Lawler interviewed Mabel, who had Diesel's WWF title, and Jim Cornette. Bulldog wasn't making any comment. And although it would have happened at a SummerSlam, there was no 28th of August edition of Monday Night Raw. Raw will turn on the 11th of September.
Alright, hey everybody, here's a little glimpse into the future. This is what it's going to look like after SummerSlam, so get used to it. I want to talk to you more just a minute, but first, I had to be the biggest shock since Pearl Harbor. British Bulldog, I didn't know you had it in you, but it was great. Tell them about it. Why?
Oh, no pumping. Not yet.
Come on, Cornette, tell us why. King, I got Anglo cinnamon, but I will say one thing. The surprises are going to keep on coming for Big Daddy Cool. It was great. It was great. Like I said, get used to it. Tell them about it, King Mabel.
This is the first part of the royal plan, Big Daddy Cool. And at SummerSlam, this belt is going to go from over my shoulder to around my slim waist.
All right. Back to you, man.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And we move on to SummerSlam. Jeff, kick us off with the results.
Alright, well, SummerSlam 1995 started with Hakushi defeating the 1-2-3 Kid in a really hard-worked match. Next up was Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the American Blue Blood, defeating Bob Sparkplug Holly. The Smoking Guns defeated the Blue Brothers, Jacob and Eli Blue with Uncle Zebekiah. Barry Horowitz defeated Skip with Sonny after some interference by Hakushi. Bertha Faye with Harvey Whippleman, the Trailer Park Queen, defeated Alondra Blaze for the Women's WWF Championship. The Undertaker defeated Kama with Ted DiBiase in a casket match. We then had Bret the Hitman Hart defeat Isaac Yanchem, DDS, Jerry the King Lawler's personal dentist by disqualification. The highlight of the night, in my opinion, Shawn Michaels defeated Razor Ramon in a ladder match for the Intercontinental title. And then in the main event of the evening, Diesel, champion of the world, defeated King Mabel with Sir Mo in a singles match for the championship.
Tom, what do you think of this show?
Well, this was my first foray, strictly speaking, into reviewing WWF shows, and I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Because having watched some and a mixed bag of ECW and WCW stuff, I've heard various negative reports about WWF programming this year. The last couple of years, really. But I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was a decent show. I just thought the main event was the worst match of the night, and that's just a terrible, terrible booking move, in my opinion. But I think otherwise it was a decent show. I actually enjoyed it. So yeah. I was pleasantly surprised.
Jeff?
I 100% echo that response. I think that if you put Shawn and Razer on last, this card maybe goes down in history as one of the best WWF cards of the 1990s. I don't think anybody wants to pay to see Mabel, but everybody on the undercard worked really hard, and it showed, and I enjoyed 80% of this card.
Yeah, there was an unusually high emphasis on, kind of just work rate, I felt, in the early kind of 2/3 of this show. Even a lot of the I think it's best summed up by the fact I think Barry Horowitz and Skip went about 11 or 12 minutes. And there were a lot of other matches like that felt that they had a lot more room to breathe than they perhaps would have done otherwise. Really hot Pittsburgh crowd who were into almost everything. Again, that probably stood out most in the Horowitz, and Skip match. But yeah, as, we had Shawn and Razer last year at WrestleMania tear the house down with a ladder match. This wasn't quite as good as that, but in many ways it was, significantly different to the point where it was almost as noteworthy. And yeah, we just, nothing could have followed that match, I don't think. I think we had that problem last year with Bret and Yokozuna at WrestleMania 10. But yeah, a real downer, and another, kind of drab main event for Diesel, but we'll come to that really, I think, as we get to it. We start the show with Dean Douglas, who says he will be conducting Summer School in Pittsburgh. We open up with the 1-2-3 Kid versus Hakushi. We start with an exchange of headlocks into an arm submission. Kid does an arm drag, which gets an appreciable response from the crowd. Vince McMahon manages to call it Summerslam, while Kid reverses a powerbomb into an arm drag. Hakushi then hits a backbreaker. Hakushi hits a back elbow in the corner, and the crowd start to get behind him. Hakushi hits a body slam, then there's a Vader bomb on the second rope. Hakushi hits a back body drop, then super kicks Kid to the outside before hitting a handspring cartwheel into a standing moonsault tope from the ring to the outside. The crowd sound its appreciation. Hakushi goes to the top, hits a nice splash, but Kid rolls out the way. Kid knocks Hakushi to the outside, then hits a crossbody over the top rope. Kid goes to the top rope, hits a frog splash, but only gets 2. Goes for a running side kick, but Hakushi catches him into a one-handed powerbomb and picks up the win. Jeff?
I thought it was just a great stylistic matchup to start off this your second biggest show of the year in SummerSlam. And I thought it was a really good overall match. The word I kept saying was Super J Cup style. Really fluid, really fast paced, really good workers in this match. Strong finish even. I felt that it was a really prototypical new generation match. My one asterisk would be that Hakushi's presentation is just a whisker away from being a really cool, badass babyface, kind of Mortal Kombat type video game character with all of the flips and the dives, and as they kind of foreshadow later in the show. But I really enjoyed this match. It was smash mouth. It was good. It was fast paced. I can't say they couldn't have booked a better match to open the show.
Tom?
I enjoyed the match. I wouldn't perhaps give it quite the glowing review that Jeff did there. That's not to say I didn't think it was good. I thought it had a number of impressive spots within it. And I think both guys, worked hard. My main concern with it was that I didn't necessarily agree with the result. I think that to start the show and to keep people happy, I just think a 1-2-3 Kid win would have made a bit more sense. But if they're trying to push Hakushi and that character, it does make sense. So that's a minor gripe of mine. But I thought it was a very solid match. There was a really impressive moonsault from Hakushi to the outside. Kids frog splash was good. I think the two guys are both technically very sound. And as Jeff said, it was a decent pace. It was a nice opener. It was a solid match. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the 1-2-3 Kid winning. I think, that there is a logic that says that if you're going to turn a guy like Hakushi babyface, you can keep him quite strong even in a losing effort if he's kind of valiant and, shows some babyface traits. But that being said, I think, Tommy, you probably touched on it, the fact that, he's a priority and the 1-2-3 Kid probably isn't, which is why they went down this road. But yeah, I had a lot of time for this match. What I quite admired about it was that this is the kind of match that on another show might have been a lot faster, and I don't think this match needs to be any quicker. It's not to say that, there were too many high spots or weren't enough. I think it was just more that I liked the fact that they managed to slow the match down in the middle otherwise. And you've got two guys of similar size that had a competitive match, and Jeff's right, it was a very good finish. Kid goes for kind of the sidekick, and Hakushi just kind of jumps up, grabs him with one arm and power bombs him. A really good finish. Jeff, you touched on it, but thoughts on Hakushi as a babyface? I think for a guy his size, that's really the only logical option.
I think that if you look at WCW over the past few years, you have Muta. Okay? I'm not comparing Hakushi to Muta because Muta's a once-in-a-lifetime dude. But I don't think the WWF has ever had a guy, an Asian babyface who does all of these awesome moves, who has that. I mean, you have the commentators talking about karate and martial arts. He's not a martial artist, but he has that really cool, vibe to him that if you book him properly, he's Mortal Kombat. I mean, he does the power bombs and the Asai moonsaults and all these things. I think there's potential to go with him in a similar sense that, if Shawn Michaels isn't long for this Intercontinental title world, that's a babyface I'd want to root for. But, I have a Japanese bias.
Tom, same question?
Yeah, I think it could work. I definitely think it could work. I think he would certainly need a mouthpiece in order to engage properly with the fans. But it doesn't take a lot. I think Jeff's right when you say he's just a whisker away from being instantly presentable as a babyface. So I don't even think it would take that much work. But I'm not sure how far they could go with it either. I don't necessarily think the character would necessarily appeal to as big of a portion of the fan base if they really wanted to get behind it. But I think it could work. Yeah. So I would support it.
Doc Hendricks is outside going all hyper, interviewing Kid Mabel. Mabel says Diesel is making a mistake if he thinks that Bulldog turning on him was the big master plan. And we move on to Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus Bob Sparkplug Holly. Helmsley takes off his shirt, which gets some audible cheers from some of the females in the audience. Helmsley twice refuses to lock up, so Holly just body slams him before hitting an arm drag. Helmsley begs off in the corner before poking Holly in the eye behind the referee's back. Hunter whips Holly across the ring, who smashes into the far turnbuckle, which makes some noise. Hunter curtsies to the crowd, which pops them. We get a picture-in-picture of the British Bulldog arriving at the arena. He's wearing sunglasses and offers no comment. After an abdominal stretch, Hunter dumps Holly over the top rope. Hunter whips Holly off the ropes. Holly catches him and hits a DDT. Holly then hits a drop kick to even things up, then fires up with a back body drop. Holly then runs into Hunter, who hits a double underhook face first pile driver, which they're calling the pedigree. Tom?
Well, first things first, I think the pedigree is a fantastic move. And I think the character is fine. I don't necessarily see how much he can do with it and how, he's obnoxious, yes, he's pompous, yes. But he'll need a bit more depth, I think, in order to moving forward. But it was a decent match. I enjoyed it. I thought that, again, both guys really worked hard here. There was a couple of really nasty spots like actually, this is another thing I picked up from watching WWF in comparison to other stuff I've watched is the sound when they work each other into the turnbuckles is amazing. I don't know if you guys have touched on this before, but it makes a real cracking sound. And there was one spot where Bob Holly was thrown into the corner. It sounded like his back could have broken from the noise. And I just thought that really came across well. It was a really decent match, and again, I agree with the outcome. I think there is legs and there's talent in Hunter Hearst Helmsley. I'll be interested to see how it plays out, because I think it could run out of intrigue quite quickly. But I've got the guy talented.
Jeff.
It was a good match. I mean, I thought both looked slightly a step off at various parts of this match. It had this feel, and this isn't a derogatory, but it had a feel of like a strong Saturday night's main event for WCW. Like, which basically, if you consider, what the match was intended to do, which was to get Helmsley over, that's what they did. Both guys worked hard within the big picture. I don't know how much consequence it was. I have a note here that kind of, should, personify what the match entailed. Goddamn, Bob Holly takes one hell of a whip into the corner. He really does. Cause I was just like, I just cringed when I saw that. And I think the pedigree finish, as a finish, is really getting over. When he grabbed that double underhook to begin with, the fans were conditioned to know what was coming up, and I think that's a really good sign. I don't know how the Blue Blood character, how far it can go, but as far as a match goes, I would, if that was ever on TV as a TV match, I would watch it. So I think they succeeded.
Yeah, I kind of go back to the first time we saw Jean-Paul Levesque on WCW pay-per-view. Well, the only time we saw him at Starrcade last year. I remember the takeaway from that. I mean, he faced Alex Wright in that match, and Wright's no slouch either in the ring. The takeaway from that match was, well, wasn't the greatest in-ring match. That one had a bit longer, I think, time-wise than this did. But the feeling was that, Levesque's control of a crowd for a guy of his experience was very good. And I kind of got the same feeling here. Jeff, have you seen that Levesque Wright match?
Oh, yeah.
Is there any, do you agree with that comparison in terms of there's a kind of pattern here?
I think my criticism, because I think everything you like, you should criticize. That's kind of my, break it down, like it, and then say, well, I hate it because.
We're getting that impression, having had you on this show a few times now.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's that Canadian thing. I think if you had to work Alex Wright at Starrcade, I think maybe you might be not the most highlighted athlete on the card. And to say that, whatever you want to call him, Jean-Paul Levesque or Hunter Hearst Helmsley, I think he's got potential to really be a workhorse. And it showed in that match. And again, but that just shows WCW not able to realize a prospect.
Well, you could have done what Paul Roma did and just, beat him up for 15 minutes.
Hey, I think Paul Roma is a hell of an athlete, and we've talked about that before.
Go back to February if you want to hear Jeff and me and, I think it was Kieran discuss that for about 20 minutes. But yeah, carry on, Jeff. Anything more?
I think that they have a really snobby heel, and the one thing I'll say is, through the card, I saw two great heels. I saw Hunter Helmsley, because he's the snob. I mean, if you watch Caddyshack, and I don't know if in the UK Caddyshack's a big movie.
I've no idea what you're talking about. Tom.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Right.
It's a golf movie. It's Bill Murray and Chevy Chase. It's the snobs versus the slobs. And you basically want to see the hoity-toity high-class guys get it, okay? I think there's business to be made in a heel snob to get his ass kicked. Now, whether that's The Undertaker, whoever's going to do it, there's business there. The other heel I thought was Shawn Michaels. And as handsome as everything is, he plays a stripper. And if I went to school the next day, I wouldn't want to wear his t-shirt. So when I watch those two guys, I see very similar things in a sense that they're handsome, they're well-groomed, they're shredded to, six-pack, eight-packs, whatever. But I'm not so sure I ever want to see them and cheer and clap and pay for a ticket to see them win. To lose, that's a different thing. And I think Vince has some opportunities here.
We cut to a tug of war with the WWS, Mabel, Henry Godwin, Savio Vega and Bam Bam Bigelow taking on members of the Pittsburgh Fire Department over the river. The WWF team won and the firefighters had to take a dip into the river. And we move on to a tag team match. It's the Blue Brothers, Jacob and Eli, with Uncle Zebekiah versus the Smoking Guns, Billy and Bart. Vince McMahon still hasn't worked out a way of telling Jacob and Eli Blue apart, so I'm largely guessing here as to which Blue is in the ring at the same time, but hopefully it'll make sense. Eli hits a body slam and drops a pair of elbows on Billy. Jacob tags in and kicks out of a 2 after a roll-up. Billy hits a leg drop. With the referee's back turned, Eli snaps Bart's neck off the ropes. We get a neat kick and neck breaker combo on Eli. The Blues then hit a double team slam. Jacob, we'll say, is in the ring. He and Eli attack Billy in the corner. Eli hits a body slam, then a big knee drop on Billy. Eli hits a big power slam. Billy almost misses his kick out, which the referee has to pull out of. The announcers comment on the officiating. Billy manages to hit a facebuster of sorts and tags in Bart. Bart body slams both twins before one of them, we'll say Eli, nails him with a big boot. Bart picks up Eli. Billy leaps from the top. They do a double team slam and leg drop. The Guns win the match. Jeff.
I have to kind of preface with my bias towards being a huge Smoking Guns fan. Both are such impressive athletes. They've got great looks, and specifically Billy Gunn as a blonde-haired guy, I think as a heel, if you gave him, say, James E. Cornette, who I have a bias towards, I think there's money there. I just think a guy that size with that vertical leap, he's a hell of an athlete. The cowboy gimmick is what it is. I don't think it really works in that Northeast specific WWF. Like when I go to shows, we don't know cowboys. We're Toronto, right? But there's something there. Both Bart and Billy, like the moves are cool. I enjoyed this match. I knew what it was. It wasn't going to be, a Meltzer 5-star, and I was fine with that.
Tom?
Yeah, I thought it was a decent match as well. I don't think it necessarily belonged to be on the SummerSlam card. I think it probably could have been on any weekly Raw episode or any other pay-per-view because it had no backstory and it had no signs of progression or the story was going to continue once the match had finished. But it was fine, and I do have a whole load of praise for the Smoking Guns and particularly Billy. I thought he shined here. I thought he was very impressive. And I think it was fine. In terms of a tag match, they worked it well. It had a decent flow, wasn't too long. But as I say, I just thought it felt a bit pointless. So it could have been if it wasn't on the show, nobody would have cared. But as it was on the show, it was a decent match and everyone enjoyed watching it. So fine.
Tom, do you share Jeff's sentiment on the Smoking Guns?
Not quite. No, I mean, not quite.
I'm sorry. When I like somebody, I like them pretty hard. So
I was going to say, we haven't got to Bret Hart yet. Carry on, Tom.
Well, when we get to Bret Hart, I'll be as bad as Jeff, so don't worry about that.
All right.
But I don't think so.
All right. Well, let's not have a challenge of geekdom. But anyway, so I think that that they're a decent tag team. The guys can work, and that's always the main thing for me. And the characters, yes, they're cowboys, but they're not coming in on horseback and swinging lassos around and really.
I've got a feeling that's budgetary. I got a feeling if they could afford that, they'd be doing just that.
But but all the time that they're not, I can deal with it. So the guys can go, they can work. It was a solid match. No issues.
Yeah, to answer the first question, first question you already asked any. I think, what are your points? I think they should have made this a number one contendership match. I think they've got something funky planned in Your House 3 regarding the tag titles. So it wouldn't necessarily be for the next pay-per-view. But I think that stipulation would have given this match some context and some, reason for being. As for the Smoking Guns, I think Jeff's half right in that the two guys playing those wrestlers, I think, are quite impressive. Well, those characters, sorry. But I don't think this gimmick is going to go anywhere fast. And equally, as much as you say Jeff, Billy Gunn would work well with Jim Cornette, I get the feeling a lot of guys would work pretty well with Jim Cornette.
The best heel manager in the business, baby.
Well, there's that. As for the match itself, it was good. Tom, I think you're right when you said this had a kind of a stench of a Raw main event on a quiet week. But, I think that's what this point in the card probably called for. And when you think about the alternatives, because, you know, this wasn't a show that necessarily stuck out as, oh, there were half a dozen guys that should have been on the show that weren't. I thought this was fine. But yeah, I'm not quite sure why they haven't got Smoking Guns into the tag title picture, because otherwise you wonder what they're doing there. But in terms of the current WWF tag team roster, you certainly would say they were one of the more impressive teams. We get a video package chronicling the backstory behind the Barry Horowitz and Skip feud. Horowitz ended a career of losses by shocking Skip by roll-up on Superstars. A couple of weeks later, he lasted a allotted 10 minutes in the rematch against Skip, which was a challenge, and that brings us to this match. With Sonny versus Barry Horowitz. Horowitz sprints straight to the ring and attacks Skip, hitting him with a big knee. He then sends him to the outside. Horowitz rolls up Skip but gets sent to the outside. He stays on the apron and hits a standing suplex, sending Skip tumbling to the outside. Sonny, presumably thinking this is a WCW match, remonstrates with referee Earl Hebner. Hebner tells her to leave, but she doesn't. Sonny trips Barry with the referee's back turned. The crowd then start a Barry chant. Completely out of nowhere, Vince McMahon correctly calls a gut-wrench suplex. The heels are completely in control. Skip misses an elbow drop. Horowitz attempts to seize the advantage, but isn't able to. Barry hits a Thez press, but Skip responds with a powerbomb. Skip does some star jumps, or Jeff, I think you'd call them jumping jacks. Would that be correct?
Jumping jacks, yeah. Thanks
That's
for
the one.
running high school in Canada.
Yeah. I thought I'd translate that. I couldn't knowingly call them jumping jacks without at least putting the English version in. Both go for a drop kick. Skip climbs to the top, but Barry hits a drop kick. Skip lands on the turnbuckle, manages to knock him off. Skip hits a diving headbutt from the second rope, but pulls out of the pin at 2. Skip goes for a pile driver, but Barry reverses it into a backdrop. We're back on the turnbuckle. Skip hits a superplex. We turn to the other way, and here's Hakushi. Hakushi jumps on the ropes, vaults over Skip. Off the distraction, Horowitz rolls up Skip for the 3. The crowd respond with a sizable pop. Tom.
This was a good match. I appreciated the backstory going into it. I think Barry Horowitz must be licking his chops at this opportunity, bearing in mind he has literally been laying flat on his back ever since he joined the company, really. And I think that the two dynamics of the guys and the way they worked really well. You really did get the impression that Horowitz was going, hell for leather in this and thinking this is his only chance at success. So I bought into the story completely. And I thought it was a good match, although there was nothing hugely impressive in it. The crowd were really, really into the match, and you touched on that earlier, Bob, but that's the job done, really, in terms of, just to hold a decent match and get the crowd to be invested in it. And they were. And I thought the finish was clever. When Hakushi turned up, I did think as he missed his cue, as he fallen asleep and thought he's on again. But then actually when it was played out, I thought it actually worked really well with the finish. Because they repeated what had been done before, really, but in a slightly different way. It was really good. I find Sonny incredibly nice to look at, but also incredibly annoying to the point where she bangs on the mat just repeatedly. And I know she's meant to be annoying because they're a heel pairing, but she was really getting on my nerves in this. And I was just thinking, I wish someone would just take her hands away, or just, I don't know, just get her out of the way. But otherwise, no, good match. I enjoyed it.
What an odd instruction. You wish someone would take her hands away.
I don't mean physically. I don't
mean
actually, we're not talking about chopping them off. I mean just so that she can't bang them on the ring. I'm not suggesting that she gets tied up either, because that would be going into weird territory. No,
let's not go any further. Jeff.
Well, as a Cornette disciple, as I guess I just have to expose myself as, Sunny or Tamara or Tammy or whatever you want to call her, she might be the best heel manager next to James E. Cornette. They have.
Hang on. Are we overlooking Sherry Martel right here?
I think we are.
I think Sherry Martel knows her spot, but I think she needs to be directed. I think Tamara or Sunny or whatever you want to call her, I think there's a natural, narcissistic, egotistical, I'm hotter than you cross between Missy Hyatt and Bobby Heenan. Okay, I think she's tremendous. I watch her and I think, you know what, she's a really pretty lady and I'd like to take her to dinner, but you know what, I don't think I'd call her back again for a second date. She seems like
well, when you find out she's got no hands, you're probably not know it.
Well, Bob, that's never been a problem for me. I don't really
All right, I've got higher standards than you. Okay.
Limbs not essential.
No.
Towards the match, you fellas. I thought it was a good solid match. The crowd seemed relatively hot, for it. And I think that after years of watching all of these squash matches where you see, your great Bob Cooks, and he's a heck of an enhancement talent, or, George South, or these guys that actually, had they be given the opportunity, could be something because they're great hands, and use the word mechanic or carpenter, or, straight up, good hands. I think you see Barry Horowitz getting this opportunity that none of them ever had before, and what if the guy that was there to be the sacrificial lamb actually showed up? And I find this entire, angle breaking the mold, and it's fun. Maybe it's a little similar to 1, 2, 3 Kid and Razer, but for me, I had fun with it. Horowitz, of course, for those who don't know, has been around the territories forever, specifically Florida, where he was trained by Boris Malenko, Jody and Dean's dad, the great Malenko, and if you go back through history, you'll find a lot on him. And for all of that, if you wanted to look at an enhancement talent, I'd say Barry Horowitz is one of your guys you want to, really work with. I think if you're a guy like, let's say, Adam Bomb, I say, please give me Barry Horowitz, because he's going to give me a great match. And this match with another, really talented worker, it shows. It was good. I enjoyed it. For what it was on the card, probably one of the most entertaining parts of the show.
Wow, that was a lot of positivity to take in. I was not expecting all of that.
It's my Canadian, Bob.
I was gonna say. I quite like this, but I'm about 15 yards inside the circle than you are in terms of how good this was. To answer the initial point, Jeff, I think you're vastly overstretching comparing Sunny to Sherry Martel.
So, Bob, how am I comparing a lady that? If you watch Smoky Mountain, you can see her dealing with like Boo Bradley and someone who has a mental handicap, and she will exploit him. She has a sinister personality that Sherry Martel couldn't come close to. I'll say this, Bob. I'll say this: if you're at the pub, as you say in the United Kingdom,
thank you. That's a bar for those of you on the other side of the pond.
If you see Sherry Martel and then you see Sunny, whose beer do you buy, or who's
that's not the question here. The question isn't who's hotter. The question is who's a more effective manager.
She's not just evil; she's a perfect 10. And from that perfect 10, she has that extra. I think she has the better psychology than Sherry Martel. I'll go to the mat on Sunny. I think she. With the right
we know.
Well, actually, Bob, I'm a
beautiful choice of words.
I'm spoken for, and I think this is in poor taste for all of us listeners to think that I would denigrate myself with such.
I'm just saying, you said the phrase, "I would go to the mat on Sunny."
No, he said take her to the mat.
Take her to the mat. Okay.
I think the origins of the mat would be the mafiosos. I'm the criminologist, Bob. There's a dispute here. I might have to take an Atlantic flight soon.
Okay.
To clear this up.
All right. I'm not going to undercut that Sunny is firstly incredibly attractive. That is undeniable, and secondly very good in the role she plays. But I think you're overstretching it, saying she's anywhere near as good as Sherry Martel. But you've seen more of her than me, fair enough. But Sherry Martel has a body of work over enough of a period of time where I think we can say that at the moment at least she's far out in front. But I guess we can kind of let that see over time how that plays out. Coming back to the match itself, I agreed, I think, with one of the final things I think, one of you said, might have been Tom, was that other than the ladder match, this was probably the most significant match on the show. Not necessarily to say it was the second best match, but I think more just that this should have got a far worse reaction than it did from the crowd. And this might have died a death in a quieter area, but the crowd were into Horowitz. They were chanting Barry, a guy who's won 2 matches. There was plenty of heat on Skip. Sunny was in her element, and I agree with Tom that, as effective as she is, they are kind of, I think, overdoing the let's cut to her at ringside during the match. They did do that a lot, and they had a lot of time to do that. But no, good match, and, I don't know. Jeff, what do you think about the finish? I kind of thought it was a bit convoluted, and I think Tom may have mentioned that it kind of felt like Hakushi might have missed his spot. I don't know that he did, but it didn't feel as smooth to me, Jeff, as it could have done.
No, it looked a little hinky, but if you can vertically leap over two people, I think you're good. And if this leads to a Hakushi face turn, I'm buying my ticket right now. Back to the Sherry Martel Sunny thing, I think the main argument and the crux to the argument is, imagine if Sunny got to work with Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase. And in years, and you're right, in the coming years, we'll be able to see. But Skip, as an opening match heel, she's been able to get people to kind of have this vitriol for her. Realistically, she should be this sex symbol. And people boo her. And I think that's an accomplishment. I think she's the star of this match. I think Horowitz, in all due respect to him as a worker, I think, in the program package, he has these huge reading glasses on. He looks like a geek, a nerd. I don't know if I want to cheer for him, but yet we want the underdog, the Rudy, to win. And I don't know. I walked away from this match saying, do I want to see more of Barry Horowitz? Maybe. I think Skip is a hell of a worker, but if Hakushi can be a face, and maybe we see some Hakushi and Skip matches, I'm all for that.
Tom, any more for anything else on this?
No, I kept quiet throughout the Sherry Sunny conversation, but I think I won't bring it back up.
Sorry for that.
No, that's all right. We all have our opinions, mate. It's fine. I think that
that was beautiful use of the word "mate" there. That implied you just completely disagreed.
I don't understand what the word mate means. I think that's the
friendly
problem.
term. No, mate is a friendly term, Bob. You've got an eye of cynicism there.
I thought that was being used sarcastically. That's all I was saying.
You might be right. But anyway,
go.
Let's stick to the talking point. I think that the Barry Horowitz thing, it can only go so far. I think they could maybe push it to the point where he gets a title match and loses, because I don't think he should win it because he's not talented enough for that. But everyone loves the underdog. They can stretch it out probably to the next pay-per-view. And I was thinking actually at the next In Your House or whenever, they could give him that title match. And people would really, really root for him. But I don't think
Diesel?
Not that title.
Shawn?
Well, no, okay, fine. I'm talking hypothetically here, theoretically. Let's not think that actually anyone wants to see Barry Horowitz beat Shawn Michaels, because no one's really going to get behind that, are they? My point is, that's what they could do with it. I just don't know if they will, because I don't think it's actually got the legs. So I think it's going to die a death pretty soon. But it's working really well, and the crowds are all buying into it, so I think it's a good angle.
Tom, I know you jumped in quite late on the ECW stuff, but there is a little, not that Mikey Whipwreck or, Barry Horowitz are the only two underdogs that have ever existed in wrestling, but it does kind of feel like a little bit of a comparison there. And, as you've seen, Mikey Whipwreck this month, admittedly, on a much smaller scale against Sandman, who's, there is some comparison made with Diesel. Mikey Whipwreck is in that spot. Maybe eventually, but I think you could tell a story on a much smaller scale. But I think the logical thing to do at the next In Your House show would just be to rematch these two. But then equally, I don't know. It's difficult. I don't know whether they've got the patience with Horowitz. But, as a one and done thing, I think he passed the test. But, I think we should probably move on. We joined Dean Douglas. He's bored. He has the word vivify written on it. Douglas analyses the finish of the prior match. There's a little bit more of the Douglas you probably would have heard in ECW in these promos. He's dialed it up a few %. It's still Shane Douglas playing a teacher, but I now at least recognise Shane Douglas, so there is something. We cut to Todd Pettengill, who's gelled up his hair. We cut back to Razer and Shawn from WrestleMania 10. We're backstage with Shawn. He says it's impossible to prepare for a match like this, and Shawn says he has nothing in life but the Intercontinental Championship. We move on to Bertha Faye with Harvey Whittleman versus Alondra Blaze, the WWF Women's title. Blaze trips Faye with a leg sweep. Blaze follows that with some weak-looking kicks. Faye hits a body slam, then a pair of leg drops. Faye hits a body slam in the corner, then there's a splash for the second rope, but Blaze moves out of the way. Blaze climbs to the top and hits a victory roll for a 2 count. Blaze bridges out of a pin, then hits a trio of slams and goes for a pin. Harvey Whittleman distracts the ref, so Alondra goes after him. She attempts a crucifix pin, but cannot get the 3. Blaze hits a nice Hurricane Rana, then a dropkick from the second rope, then a second. She attempts a third, but Faye is equal to it and moves out of the way. Faye hits a powerbomb, and despite Blaze appearing to kick out 3, we have a new women's champion. Jeff.
Hated the finish. However,
What part of the finish?
well, the kick out. If you're going to beat somebody, beat somebody. Okay? As far as I'm concerned, if you get powerbombed and you're going to kick out, it's a cop-out finish. I think, if you're going to do a return match, maybe. I think the whole Trailer Park Queen gimmick is kind of a, I don't know, it's in poor taste. I don't know if poor taste is even the right word. It just feels kind of sloppy, especially when you if you go from Bull Nakana to Bertha Faye, that's a big drop-off. And I think that's kind of indicative of the women's division. Now, it was a short match. I don't like to see the shoulder kicked up at 3. It's a personal pet peeve unless they're going somewhere. And I highly doubt that with all the talent they have, Bertha and Blaze is their apex interest. However, both of these ladies have extensive All Japan women's experience, so they're trained. They know what they're doing. And if you watch the match, they don't botch anything. They're doing realistic work. The problem is that they're being booked in a comedy match, and in response, it feels like a concession stand break. I think that the roster is so shallow for women's wrestling right now. Unless you want to really bring in all of the ladies from Japan, you're going to have this kind of ho-hum response. I thought of all the matches on this card, this kind of got the least reaction. Heel wins. Whippleman is kind of an ineffective manager.
He's worse than Sonny.
Well, he's less attractive, Bob.
Well, there's that as well.
Well, to each his own, Bob. I just thought this match lacked fire. I think Rhonda Singh, aka Bertha Faye, when she worked Japan, she's a fellow Canadian, so I'm going to be biased. All right.
We get that, Jeff. You're Canadian, you're biased. I think we'll take that as a given from that.
I think the bias has to be noted that all Canadian wrestlers are better. So
okay.
We have to be careful there. The bias is rooted in fact. But she's trained. She comes across as this slob, and Vince, and I don't know if this was still Jerry Lawler, they were mean to the heel, and they were kind of knocking the heel as being this blubbery, it felt tasteless. Pass, bring back, Bull Nakano, or just treat Alondra Blaze as the champion and have her be Bruno and beat nobodies.
Well, there's that. Tom?
I didn't enjoy this match at all, really. I must admit, I don't have the background knowledge of Bertha Faye's work in Japan to fall back on, but I thought she came across as slow. Obviously, she's a larger lady, so she's not going to have pace. But
that ring gear, Tom, really kills it, doesn't it?
It just she comes across as a clown. Like, there's nothing I thought in seeing the match and seeing how she was presented and the commentary, etc., that would have led me to believe, if someone had told me, that she was going to win the title. I thought it was preposterous. I couldn't understand the booking of that decision. I think Alondra Blaze she's talented, and I'm not doubting that Bertha Faye has talent. But in this match, she didn't show me anything to lead me to believe that she is as talented or more talented than Alondra. Therefore, why give her the belt? And the presentation of how they're trying to let fans, how fans are hearing about her is shocking. Like what Jeff was saying, they're basically saying she's horrible to look at and she can't do anything. But here you go, here's the belt. So there you go. You don't really dislike her because she's not a great heel. and you're not going to cheer her because they tell you not to, basically. So why give it to her? I didn't get it. And although I did laugh when I saw and this was nasty of me to laugh, but I did laugh that someone in the crowd was holding a sign saying Bertha fat, because it's just so creative. I don't know how they came up with that. No sarcasm at all. But anyway, I didn't enjoy the match.
No, I know what you mean. That this is the kind of match where I didn't particularly enjoy it, even if I can't tell you there were many things wrong with it. As I mentioned to you, Tom, I think there's a presentation issue with Bertha Faye. They put her with Harvey Whittleman, who, as we kind of alluded with Jeff earlier, isn't particularly a particularly effective manager. And doesn't particularly have any credibility in the way that kind of a Cornette or someone like that would carry. And they dress her in this kind of very kind of, Jeff, comedic ring gear. Would that be the best way of describing it?
I think it would be, exemplary of a heavyset lady.
I
think it would be, I think the trailer park queen and the trailer trash kind of idioms apply to her. I think that's what they want. They want a little skinny guy and a very Rubenesque lady.
Well said.
I think it's a very I won't say the word exploitative because I think all of pro wrestling is exploitative. But I just think let's put it like this. She's not wearing leather pants and a cool shirt to make her look like a badass. So they're getting what they're getting out of her, and it's obvious.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And the match was fine, and Jeff, I think you touched on it earlier as well, they're both clearly very good as performers in terms of just they're well trained, the moves, there's nothing wrong with the match itself, but I think it's telling that this match in front of this crowd played out with such a lack of heat. The finish was a bit of a cop-out. Blaze kind of kicked out at 3, but what I found more strange was that she kicked out at 3 and yet nobody really seemed to mention it. I don't know whether they're going to bring that up in the future, but I don't know why the announcers weren't on top of that. If that was the story you wanted to tell getting out of it, I don't even recall that, Jim Ross attempted to get some comments from Faye after the match when she didn't really speak. But there wasn't really any mention of, didn't you notice she kicked out at 3? It wasn't like the bit earlier where there was kind of questions over the officiating, sorry.
I wondered if it was, Bob, I wondered if it was a botch actually when I saw it.
Me too.
Yeah, when they don't mention it, you're led to think, okay, that wasn't meant to happen. And they
what was meant to happen though? What, just, do you think, Faye won the title by accident?
No, I think Alondra was meant to lay flat, and I think the only thing I can possibly think of is that there might be some backstage politics going on, and Alondra didn't like the fact she was losing the belt, so she did that to sort of rub Bertha up the wrong way because she was getting the win, but she wasn't happy with it. But otherwise, I think it was a mistake, and she was meant to be out for the count.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I wonder whether there was something else going on there as well, but yeah, that was that.
Coliseum video fans, what a very special exclusive we have for you. You just witnessed the history between the Supreme Fighting Machine, and my Undertaker. And in just a few moments, you'll witness a little more history as my Undertaker takes his stroll down the aisle and steps into the ring and puts an end to the Supreme Fighting Machine. This time, you dug your own grave. And now I'm here to make sure that you lie in it. The crimes perpetrated against my creatures, that went over the line of what I can accept, what I can tolerate. The sands have fallen slowly through the hourglass till this time. And now as the last one slides through, your day of reckoning is at hand. The day that you come face to face with all that is good and all that is evil. You look into the eyes of the Reaper, and you'll see that your fate is sealed. When this fateful night ends, you can rest assured that your soul will belong to me, and it will return to the dark side, Rest in peace.
We watch a clip from WWF Superstars where Kama slams one of Undertaker's creatures of the night. As a result, Gorilla Monsoon ordered that the Kama-Taker match be a casket match. Undertaker in a promo says Kama's attacks on his creatures went over the line of what he can accept. I move on to the casket match. It's Kama with Ted DiBiase versus The Undertaker with Paul Bearer. The action begins as Undertaker gets into the ring. He unloads on Kama. He throws him over the top right onto the casket and Kama is dazed. Undertaker orders the casket open and throws Kama straight into it, but Kama hops back out. This is the same double-wide, double-deep casket used against Yokozuna last year. Kama regains some control and knocks Taker to the mat, but Taker sits up. The crowd are get going with a rest in peace chant. Kama knocks Undertaker onto the casket, who lands hard. DiBiase starts kicking Undertaker on the outside. Paul Bearer goes berserk, whipping off his jacket. He has to be restrained by the referees. Kama picks up the Undertaker and drives his back into the ring post. Kama sets for a pile driver onto the casket, but Taker flips him with a backdrop into the ring. The crowd set for a loud rest in peace chant. Kama attempts a pin on Undertaker. Kama locks in a sleeper and even uses the ropes for leverage, but it's legal in this match. This being true, Bearer still knocks his feet off the ropes. Kama goes back for the sleeper, which Taker slowly rallies out of. Taker hits his flying clothesline and the casket lid goes open. He clotheslines Kama over the top into the casket but falls in himself. The lid closes on them both, so the match continues. Kama crawls out, dragging some of the casket with him. Taker drags him back in, knocking Kama down, but Kama gets out again. Taker chokeslams Kama in the ring, then hits the tombstone. The crowd are going nuts at this point. Taker tombstones Kama just once, then rolls him into the casket for the win. Jeff.
I mean, this match was what it was. I'd maybe question the wisdom behind booking both a ladder match and a casket match on the same pay-per-view. I think you can spread out your, gimmick matches. But with that said, I suppose that the gimmick match of Kama versus Taker in a casket match maybe needs that smoke and mirrors. So, I mean, I maybe just contradicted myself, but it's not like Kama is Ricky Morton or Ricky Steamboat or anybody who could relatively bump. So Taker and him, I always felt like Kama kind of worked like he was in cement when he was doing his offense. So it was a little dull for me. They need the smoke and mirrors, so a straight match isn't necessarily necessary here. Personally, I'm waiting for Taker and DiBiase's $1 million corporation to just that feud to die. I hate it. I just think it's a waste of everybody involved. I thought Kama's, his kicks and the kind of gimmick that, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, UFC gimmick is kind of cool. But he's just, it's like he's working in quicksand. It's just kind of dull. And that kind of gets me to the overall point. When I'm watching this match, I'm not even really enjoying the match. I'm going, this is SummerSlam, one of the biggest cards of the year, and the Undertaker's working with the guy I don't really care about. And I think we just look at how soft that heel side of the roster is when both Taker and Bret are working with guys who aren't necessarily versatile. And it feels like there's a short-sightedness and a waste of those talents. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I felt like there was nothing at stake here. At no point did I feel Kama was going to win. There was not a guy that was going to put Undertaker down for the count. And, subsequently, I think my response is just kind of indifferent.
Jeff, has Undertaker been working with guys that people don't really care about for a long time now?
Yes, potentially. If you want to go back to Giancam and those type of guys. But I think
and Mabel and Bundy and IRS and Undertaker, fake Undertaker. The list is quite long.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're squandering what he's able to do as a babyface because he's got that cool supernatural gimmick. However, I'll say that the Taker Yokozuna feud, at no point did I think Taker was going to walk through him, because I thought that Yoko was this big, just this badass sumo guy. And I think that they need to develop these heels, because if you want to have a babyface that's going to crush guys, you got to build up the monsters to slam, and Kama has never fit that build, and tonight was no exception for me.
Tom.
I would agree on some of the points that Jeff made. I mean, particularly on Karma being just so slow and sort of painfully slow at times. But I had a few thoughts during this match. I thought that it reminded me how much I love the Undertaker character and how that list of guys that you reeled off that he's been feuding with recently, or even the last couple of years. It almost doesn't matter who he's feuding with because he is such a good character and the guy is so good in the ring for someone his size. It almost doesn't matter because everyone comes to see the Undertaker. However, I think they're missing a trick because if they had him up against someone that was at his level on the other side of the ring, we could be talking, one of the best feuds or the best matches of the year every month of the year. So I don't know. I feel like they're holding back on him slightly, but. The match was really quite good actually. I thought for what it could be, it was probably as good as it ever was going to be. I don't think at any point, and Jeff touched on this as well, at no point did I think that Karma was going to win, and that does take something away from it because you're not really invested in terms of the result. Because you know what the result is going to be, but I was reasonably invested in how it was going to be played out, and I thought the actual psychology in the match was fine. Both of them getting trapped in the casket at the same time was good. There was a good image of when Karma was trying to climb out and Taker was sort of pulling him back in, and it just reminded me of like the Evil Dead or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of those proper horror images of him dragging him back down into the pits. I thought that was cool. And one thing that did surprise me in this actually, and I haven't watched that much WWF this year to say if it's a new thing, but they really seem to be pushing this Taker babyface thing because Paul Bearer was really involved and like he was actually, I saw at one point, I saw him turn into the crowd and actually starting a rest in peace chant, and I've never seen him so animated. And that was echoed in the segment that you touched on, Bob, when he took his jacket off and went running at Dibiase. And I got way too invested in that, and I actually jumped out of my seat, and I was going, Paul, get him, Paul.
He was moving quickly as well for a guy of his size. He was motoring.
Yeah, had a touch of Vader about him, I thought actually. Mainly
that's the first and only time that Paul Bearer we compare with Vader, but no, fair enough.
But I was all in for that, and when the referees were pulling him back, I was trying to get him out of the way and all that. Anyway, I think that the babyface thing is working really well for Taker, and the Creatures of the Night thing actually works really well because it means that people in the crowd can get behind him, and there's a reason to get behind him. So I just think he needs that opponent that's at the same level that he is to really show what he can do. And I hope they do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, this was weird because I wasn't massively high on this match. One of my overriding feelings was that perhaps the casket stipulation possibly took away from it in the sense that it meant a lot of the kind of in-ring action was quite inconsequential. There's one point where Camera sets up for a pin and they're like, well, you can't win this match by pinfall. But that all being said, all of our qualms aside and all of these, I think, quite valid points about Undertaker's character and what they're doing with him, the crowd went nuts at the end. The crowd were just off one. And it was like, you can't deny that. There are some times where it's like, if there's that many people creating that kind of reaction, maybe I'm wrong. And, it's not to say I was massively negative on this match, but the crowd were almost felt like they were reacting to a different match. I don't ever get the sense, I don't get the sense anyone in the building thought Undertaker was going to lose. It wasn't like it was this massive moment, but the crowd were just going berserk. And so it'll be, but yeah, I agree with Jeff. The Taker Dibiase feud needs to end. It needs to go away. Dibiase does seem incredibly good at just kind of magnetically attracting heels towards him that don't really have any credibility or, any kind of standing, which is kind of part of the reason they're with him. But it does fall a bit flat when it comes to trying to create money matches of note. Anyway, we move on. It's Dr. Isaac Yanchem, DDS versus Bret Hart. Jerry Lawler is on hand to introduce Isaac Yanchem, DDS, who comes out wearing an eye magnifier and entrance music, which is essentially just drilling. Lovely. Bret cuts a promo on the other side of the curtain, and we start with Yanchem starting on Bret in the corner. He drives his head off the turnbuckle. Yanchem catches Bret and drives him into the mat, then goes for a big elbow drop, but misses. Bret sends Yanchem to the outside, then hits a crossbody over the top rope. Bret sets for the sharpshooter mid-ring. Yanchem resists, so Bret just drives his head into Yanchem's midriff. Yanchem drops Bret onto the ropes. Bret briefly gets his wrist jammed between the two ropes. Yanchem whips Bret into the far turnbuckle that Bob Holly hit earlier, and it's still making a good sound. Jerry Lawler is acting as a cheerleader on the outside. Yanchem works over Bret on the ropes. The referee pulls Yanchem off the submission by his hair. Yanchem isn't happy. Bret is draped over the ropes. Yanchem climbs to the top, almost losing his footing, and just about connects with a flying leg drop. Decent move for a guy of his size. Bret does a suicide dive through the ropes and unloads a series of rights on Yanchem on the outside before driving his head off the steps. Bret hits the bulldog for a 2, then a Russian leg sweep. Bret gets a sharpshooter locked in. Lawler crawls from his announcer's position over his desk to distract the ref. Yanchem pulls Bret to the outside and throws him into the steps. Yanchem climbs to the top, but Bret springs to life and throws him off of it. Bret pulls Yanchem's legs around the ring post and ties them together using an electrical cable. The ref attends to Yanchem as Bret goes after Lawler. Yanchem climbs to the top and hits a double axe handle. Lawler grabs hold of Bret but doesn't let go before the 5 count, and the referee calls for the bell. Bret gets his head trapped between the ropes, which actually looks quite painful. Bret eventually gets set free, and then Bret does end up walking through a Razer Ramon promo after the match. He just kind of walks through on screen. Tom?
Yeah, I should pre-warn everybody that I'm not Canadian, but I'm extremely biased towards Bret Hart. He's my favourite in-ring worker in the world. So I enjoy every match of his that I watch. However, having said that, am I right in saying this is Isaac Yanchem's debut?
Correct.
Yeah, I was actually impressed. I thought I looked at him and I thought, oh no, he's been reeled off the production line because of how tall he is, and he's in good shape. But I thought he was going to be green as hell, and he was. You could tell he was green, but actually he's been trained well. I think I remember reading that he was trained by Al Snow, which actually says a lot in terms of how he carried himself. I thought it was a decent match. I think Bret Hart could have a good match with anybody. It's that's that old phrase. He could have a good match with a broomstick. But Yanchem's got some talent. And actually, as you said, Bob, he's surprisingly agile. That leg drop he did was impressive. And there was a couple of good, nice sequences in the match, like when Bret sort of tried. He rolled over Yanchem's back and went down behind him for a roll up. I thought that was a really nice sequence. And one problem I did have with it is I thought that there should have been a disqualification called a lot sooner than it was, because the King got physically involved in the match before the DQ was given. And I think the only point they gave the DQ was when they started getting him in the ropes. I think, if I might be remembering that incorrectly, but it should have come sooner. And I agree with you. That spot with Bret's head between the ropes did look really, really nasty. And I found myself getting quite uncomfortable watching it, because you could tell the only thing that was causing Bret from probably choking himself out was him actually prying the ropes apart far enough to keep his windpipes open.
There was one camera angle from kind of behind Bret that had the ropes disappearing into his hair, and it's like, they don't look like they go very far apart. And I know that those ropes are very taut. So yeah, I wouldn't be all that surprised if Bret wasn't actually in quite a bit of discomfort with that. Go on, Tom, carry on.
Yeah, no, and I think it's fine, but he didn't need to be in there for as long as he was. And I think that's where they sometimes need to be a bit safer with things, because Bret's the kind of guy, he's a workhorse. He's never going to be the one to say, oh, that went on for too long or anything like that. But they should be a bit more careful, I think. But he seemed to be fine. The segment, as you say, he walked in on Razor's interview, which I thought was quite cool backstage. And Razor sort of shrugged it off. I thought that was a nice touch. Good match. I think Yanchem is, this feud's obviously going to continue, with King as well involved. And I think it works reasonably well. And I think, Yanchem's got potential to actually be a pretty solid worker. And because of his size, he'll stand out from the crowd. This is a big thumbs up from me.
Jeff?
First note, Bret deserves better. All right? You have Razor and Shawn in a ladder match. You have Diesel in the main event. And you have potentially your biggest star in a match with a monster gimmick that feels like a really bad Saturday Night Live sketch with endless puns via Jerry Lawler. I could reiterate this forever. Bret's a serious, legitimate, athletic competitor. So when they put him in there with a goofy gimmick monster heel, it just doesn't resonate with me. It just feels like, okay, Bret's going to have to go through the motions to carry this guy. I mean, I'm familiar with Unabomb or Yanchem or whatever you want to call him from Smoky Mountain, but he's not on Bret Hart's level, let alone, a Monday Night Raw level at this point. He's a, pardon the pun, a raw talent. Bret deserves to work with guys that can meet him hold for hold, that can perform at his level, and if he has to bring someone up, let's make sure the feud matters. I thought Lawler and Bret was the final nail in the coffin at King of the Ring, and now we've got this dentist. The best part about the dentist gimmick is the drill theme song because it's so grating and annoying. For me, the match went on too long. Lawler himself, he has no credibility to ever beat Bret. Bret deserves better. If you're going to have Razer and Shawn in a ladder match rematch, Owen Hart's there, and yet Bret's wrestling a dentist. I think that kind of exemplifies WWF booking for SummerSlam. Bret deserves better. End of argument.
Yeah, I wasn't particularly keen on this match. It was one of those things, I think the match lasted kind of 16, 17 minutes. And you get these matches every now and then where there are matches that you know aren't going to go to a finish. And as a result, they never really go anywhere. And this kind of felt like one of those matches. They didn't really feel like there were many kind of chapters or layers to it. The action, while tight and while well executed, didn't particularly seem to be of much consequence. Yanchem isn't over enough yet to the point where I think he feels like, and that I think was the biggest problem. You've got Yanchem, a guy who's, been on Raw for 3 weeks, hasn't wrestled a match to the best of my knowledge. And is, and there's also the thought, Jeff, that what's Yanchem's beef with Lawler, really? I mean, I know it. I can tell you it. I can tell Lawler's like, I'm bringing my dentist along, and there's all of that. I know he wants to, dominate the WWF. But it's like, these two don't really feel like they have a beef. It feels like a de facto beef with Jerry Lawler that at best feels forced as well.
Yeah, it feels like Memphis booking. It feels like Lawler's whole gimmick for years was you build up the monster and then you feed him to Lawler. And now Lawler's the guy who's feeding the monsters to the, tenured babyface, and it just feels flat. It's not a knock against Isaac Yanchem, because you know what? If I'm given that spot to work Bret Hart, I take it. But I feel for Bret because Bret's working with a guy who's not his caliber. There's no heat. There's no feud. Like, what's the feud? The feud is that the guy I hate is having his dentist wrestle me. Now, yeah. I've never wanted to fight a dentist in my life, and I've had cavities and, wisdom teeth taken out. I just go, you know what? That's their job. So at this point, it feels like old WWF booking while trying to be new generation, and that comes off as a fail.
Yeah, I just jump in there. I do agree with that, and that's one thing that I thought is that this type of character is so not the new generation, and that's a term that was used so much during SummerSlam. This is Diesel was the leader of the new generation, and many other guys, Razer and Shawn mentioned, they're all part of the new generation. And Yanchem feels like he's come directly out of the old generation, and that is a mistake. But I think in time, I hope in time that they'll realise that. And I think there's enough in him for him to actually warrant his place on the card. And I think, again, Bob, you touched on this on the last match, but the crowd were really into this. And, Bret got a really big pop when he came out, and of course he's over as we know he is. But I didn't get the impression that anyone that was watching it didn't enjoy it there. So all the time that the crowd's cheering it and going home with a smile on their face, are they really making mistakes? I guess we can look into it and say that they are.
Maybe the crowd's wrong. Maybe that's it. Maybe us three are right and the X number of 1,000 people there are all wrong. That's it,
mate. You go down there with a microphone and tell them all that. That's
sounding to me like the best, explanation that I can come up with. But anyway, we move on. As I say, Bret just randomly walked through the middle of a Razer Ramon preview, just shot in front of the camera and walked off. Razer says Shawn's career is on the line as well as his belt. And we move on. Take a deep breath in. I've just seen the length of my notes for this match. It's the Intercontinental title ladder match. It's Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon. We have a delay while they try and get the belt in the correct position and at the correct height. Razor and Shawn exchange words in the centre of the ring. Razor shoves Shawn and we're underway. Michaels sets for a super kick, but Razor stops short and grabs onto the ropes. Razor goes for Razor's edge and Shawn slides out of it. Razer sends Shawn flying into the corner. Shawn does the Flair corner spot on an unbelievable pace. Razer sets off up the R-way to get the ladder. Shawn goes after him and the ladder remains in situ. Razer does an apron suplex to the outside. Shawn cracks his foot on the guardrail but seems to be okay. Razer hits a big fall-away slam from the second rope. We have a ladder in the ring. Razer attempts to retrieve the belt, but Shawn pushes him off the ladder. Shawn attempts to climb it. Razer pulls at his trunks and reveals his backside to the crowd. The female section of the crowd pop big for that. Razer pulls Shawn off the ladder. Michaels lands awkwardly with his leg trapped between the ladder. Razer rams the ladder into the back of Michaels' ankle, at the same ankle that Michaels snaps off the guardrail. Razer then Sam Michaels, ensuring that his legs land on the ladder. Razer sets up the ladder across the second rope in the corner, then does a sort of atomic drop on it. Razer continues working on Shawn's leg and ankle. Shawn is struggling. Razer at one stage just takes the ladder and lets it fall on Shawn's leg. Razer is healing this up big time. Razer starts to climb the middle of the ring. Shawn somehow climbs to the top and hits a double axe handle, knocking Razer to the mat. Razer scales the ladder. Michaels follows and hits a back body drop. Ladder gets propped up in the corner. Michaels whips Razer into it and Razer takes an awkward bump. Michaels puts the ladder in the next corner. Razer takes this same bump, this time back first. Michaels scales the ladder in the corner, then does a moonsault from the top. Michaels sets to the big top of the ladder splash in the corner like from last year. He jumps, but Razer moves out of the way. The pair climb the ladder at opposite sides. They go for what seems to be a choreographed double fall, but mistime it. Michaels crotches himself on the top rope, and Razer falls awkwardly to the mat and then to the outside. Razer goes to the outside and fetches a second ladder from underneath the ring. Michaels goes to climb the ladder. Razer puts him into the Razor's edge and dumps him to the canvas. Both men are out flat. Razer sets up his ladder. Shawn sets up his. They climb parallel ladders. Shawn knocks Razer off, but then tumbles from the ladder in attempting to grab the title. Michael sends Razer to the outside, climbs the ladder, then gets two hands on the belt, but falls off. Given how quickly he recovered the second time, I think that may have been a mistake. Michaels then climbs the ladder, grabs the title, and ends a brutal match. Tom?
Why wasn't this the main event? I cannot understand it. I do understand it because it's for the Intercontinental title, not the World title. But my God, the crowd were on fire for this match. Shawn Michaels is a megastar. He is absolute money. He is, everything about him is saying, you can get more out of me than you're getting. And he knows it, And maybe that's why he's as good as he is in the ring, because he knows he's got to prove something. But my God, this match, I agree with what you said earlier on, Bob. It wasn't quite as good as their match at WrestleMania. But it was an excellent match. And I was thinking at times, because I'm such a big Bret fan, I was thinking I'd like it to have been Bret versus Shawn. But Bret actually has got the technical ability that actually I prefer to see him wrestle than in those gimmick matches. So actually Razor Ramon, he can really work. And he's got pace, he's quick. He's got great psychology in the ring, and you can tell he really knows what he's doing. And I just thought this match was great. And some of the bumps were particularly nasty. Like there's the suplex to the outside where Shawn hit his foot on the rails. That looks painful. Shawn can sell like no one I've ever seen before. Ric Flair can sell, but Shawn, my God, I don't think I've ever seen anyone sell an injury better than he does. There was a punch to Shawn on the outside from Razer. I rewound and watched it twice because it looked so good, and it was just a punch, just one punch. And the guy is, I can't sing enough praises for him. And I think that it was a huge mistake putting this match A, before the main event, but B, so close to the main event. If they'd opened the show with it, people could have sort of forgot about it, or I say forgot about it, but then they could have had their energy boosted by the time the main event came around, even though that's probably quite unlikely given the two people that were in it. But I think it was a huge mistake, and I can't understand the logic for it. It's almost like, and with the fireworks and everything, and the way that they sort of presented it, it's almost like they knew that it should have been the main event as well. But it's like, well, we're going to present it as the main event, almost like a mini main event, but you've still got to sit through 10 minutes of crap after it anyway. No, I could sing praises for this match forever, but I won't. I'll just say that it was the match of the night, and I really, really, really enjoyed it.
Jeff?
No, I 100% agree. I thought it should have gone on last. And it's not like there wasn't a precedent set in 1992 when Bret and Davey went on last.
It's not like Bret didn't go on it not last like for every match of his title reign last year either.
No, I mean, I felt like, you know what, if backstage, if anyone thought, you know what, guys? Diesel and Mabel are going to blow this match out of the water. I think you got to fire those people right now. These guys have tremendous chemistry. They've obviously worked the ladder match for the last 18 months on and off. They get it. They have good psychology, as much as you can ask for a ladder match, especially between two baby faces, even though Razer works the heel. I think what most impressed me of this match was, look, they already had the quote-unquote 5-star ladder match. This ladder match, they had to come up with everything entirely new, a different style to make you think this one was better. Whether or not they accomplished it, personally, I think there were times where they worked harder in certain spots. Specifically, I made note, I was like, Shawn Michaels makes these ridiculous bumps, this dangerous bumps throughout the match, especially the suplex to the outside, and I regard them as Dynamite Kid-esque, which, is a word of caution to Shawn Michaels, but don't let that get in the way of entertainment. Now, Razer was working heel, kind of, it was like that, he was working the leg. I was wondering, maybe this is SummerSlam 92, and Bret goes on to work for the world title while Davey gets the Intercontinental. Maybe Shawn wins here and Razer goes on. Because for me, when I watch this match, I go, you know what? Razer is, sorry Lex, the total package. He has that hybrid size and $1 million look of Diesel and Taker, but he has that in-ring ability and poise of that new generation brand that Shawn and Bret and Kid and Owen all kind of encapsulate. And when I look at Razer, I think, you know what, maybe he loses this match, and it was a great match, but maybe he wins in the long run because he's not embroiled in the Intercontinental. I mean, he does have a run-in with the Dean later, but I think, he's just got everything Vince McMahon himself likes in a main eventer. I left this going, you know what, maybe the loser ends up winning here. And I really enjoyed this match.
Yeah, firstly, 3 for 3 on this should have been the main event. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we spent 1994 with Bret Hart being the champion and not being in the main event for matches that were far less deserving of the final spot than this would have been. Admittedly, the one thing I will say about that is that, maybe it was WrestleMania, so it was a bit different, but, this match was the co-headline of WrestleMania 10, and Bret and Yokozuna didn't feel quite out of place as the Diesel and Mabel did here. The match itself was exceptional. As I think I mentioned earlier, and one of the critiques really of the 94 match, one of the criticisms is that it's kind of Shawn Michaels wrestling a ladder. That's a line I've heard before. And I don't agree with that, but I can understand where they're coming from in the sense that you feel like Shawn made that match last year. I don't think in this one was the case. I feel like Razer more than held his own. I love him just healing it up. I love that they basically built him up as a heel. He never really got booed, which I think is testament to how he did that, given that he was kind of viciously working over Michael's ankle. But they also, they corrected it at the end, and well, I'll come to it now because I didn't mention it. After the match, Razer snatches the belt from Shawn, hands it back to him, offers out a hand, the pair shake hands, and then raises Shawn's arm. So there's kind of that bit of moment of respect at the end. But a really, really good match. If I had one criticism, I thought Shawn took a hell of a beating on his ankle in the opening third of that match. I don't feel he properly sold it for the rest of the match. I wonder whether it's more of a case of perhaps you shouldn't have had the beating be quite so severe, but it's like that was the kind of beating that should have Shawn Michaels working off one leg for the rest of the match. And he sold it at times, but it's like you can't do a moonsault off the top of a ladder off one leg. You can't do a splash off the top of a ladder off one leg. You can't climb the ladder at the pace he was climbing it at times off one leg. So if I had a criticism, it was that. But you can call it adrenaline. You can explain it away if you like. Tom, I'll ask you a question based on a point I made, a little bit earlier in that point. That there is that thought we're talking about Shawn, and quite rightly so. There is that thought that Shawn at the ladder match last year wrestled the ladder. I don't necessarily agree with it. But I think we've really got to give Razer credit in that if you kind of feel that time, I don't think you can say this time that Razer didn't hold up his end of the bargain.
No, I would absolutely agree with you. I think that would, in their planning for this match, if I was Razer, that would be my main focus, would be to say, look, everyone loves the match we had last time, but I want this match to be memorable for the two of us, not just for you, because the big moment from the previous match was the splash from the top, which is Shawn. You can't even see Razer in the clips that they show of that match. And I think you could see that from Razer. He had a real sort of sting in his step, and he really was pushing his game up in this match, I think, in terms of his level of aggression and the way that he was slamming the ladder down onto Shawn's ankle and all that business. I thought that it was perfect. I think, well, I agree with your point, Bob, just on a slightly different tangent. Did either of you guys think that the end felt like it was a botch, and actually Shawn, yeah? So
well,
Shawn,
given how quickly Shawn shot up that ladder the second time, I think when he grabbed the belt the first time, then fell off, I think you watch Shawn's facial reactions, that was meant to be the finish. And he looks quite pissed off when he rights the ladder, climbs up it pretty quickly, if we're going to be critical. He kind of had to because Razer was stirring, so he can't, I'll let him off that. Given the match he'd been through, he made an error. Yeah, he covered for it well enough. But Jeff, did you think any differently on that?
I thought you could kind of see through the veneer of the HBK character into Shawn Michaels, the person, having a little bit of a temper tantrum. And you know what? In front of however many people at the Igloo in Pittsburgh, maybe as a professional, after going through this war, you don't necessarily respond the way you do, or Shawn does.
I don't know. I mean, if I've gone through that match and I've gone through a match that's that good and then I fuck the finish, I'd find it quite difficult, you could argue it, and it will go against everything we know about Shawn Michaels the person, but you could argue that most people in that situation might be quite miffed that they've just blown the finish. Go on, Jarrett.
And the flip side to that would be Bret Hart wouldn't have. So.
Well, yes. Yes. Well,
Bob, I actually thought, and I went back to rewatch this twice. I think he might have actually botched the finish twice. Because when you go back, he's at the top of the ladder and he jumps off. He literally leaps off the ladder to grab it, misses it. He then gives Razer a backdrop to the outside, then goes up and grabs it and falls off while he's holding it. He then climbs up again and grabs it. I actually think he was meant to grab it the first time, and I think that's why he was so annoyed. Because he actually did it twice.
I wonder whether he kind of thought, I'm going to make a dart at this really big finish, the jump off the ladder and try and grab it. But with a view of, this might not go well. If not, I'll dump Razer to the outside and then climb up. And then, because what he tried to do the second time was kind of grab onto the belt. And as he grabbed onto it, he tried to kind of fall off and kind of rip the belt off with him. And that was how he blew the second finish. So I get the feeling that he kind of did the first one with a viewpoint, well, this might not work. I'm going to try. If it doesn't work, we got this full backup plan. And then it failed again. And that's why I think he might have been quite frustrated. But I think you may be right there. He may have had two darts at the finish. But, we can be hypercritical of this match. It was phenomenal. I mean, I think one of the best spots of the match was the suplex early on, where Shawn just rattles his ankle off the guardrail. It's one of those things where it sounded so good that it looked like an accident, but given how much it played into the next kind of 10 minutes of the match, it's like, well, I don't think that was an accident. And yet fair play for Shawn and Razer for lining up that bump, and Shawn for taking a bump that must have hurt. But anyway, we move on to the main event.
Wow, I thought I've seen it all. But let's start right off with the definition of bad. A failure to reach an acceptable level of performance. I think tonight here at SummerSlam, the entire world sat in awe and saw exactly why the bad guy, Razor Ramon, is called the bad guy. Let's backtrack for just a second. There is a slang or a street use of the word bad, but we'll not go with that one because that means good. Instead, let's go with the proper definition of what bad is all about, because it means failure to accept.
Yo, Chico, I don't need some armchair quarterback, some bookworm telling the bad guy how to fight.
Now, wait.
All you've done so far is talk, man.
No, wait just 1 second. You got no right to barge in here in my section of the...
Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah?
Now
Well, let's get it on.
Now, just wait 1 second there, my friend. Wait 1 second. This is a classroom, and we don't need any violence here.
Well, that's what I thought there, Dean. You all bluff and no stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Any way you want it, guy.
Come on, go. You want some, man? You want to get it on, man? Huh? Want some more, Chico?
Unbelievable!
Bring it.
Unbelievable! Razer Ramon, ladies and gentlemen, taking it to Dean Douglas.
We're back with Dean Douglas. Douglas implies that Razer is the bad guy because he falls short of standards. Razer confronts him during the segment. They have an altercation. Douglas takes a swing. Razer blocks him and lays him out. And we move on to the main event. It's the WWF Championship match. It's King Mabel with Sir Mo versus Diesel. Mabel grabs the title off Diesel and poses with it. Major shoulder tackles Diesel, then shouts, "I'm ready to be the first black champion." Diesel charges at Mabel in the corner, sends Mabel tumbling to the outside. Diesel hits a crossbody to Mabel on the outside, taking him down. Mabel charges at him, but runs into a big boot. Mabel whips him into the corner, then hits a slam. Mabel then drops all of his body weight onto Diesel's lower back. Neither man then moves for a while. Seemingly Mabel is working a submission. Mabel hits a body slam, then goes dropping a running elbow, but Diesel moves. With the official down, Sir Mo and Mabel double team Diesel. Outruns Lex Luger. It's not really clear whose side he's on because Diesel, thinks he might be, turning on him like Bulldog did. Diesel fights him off, but the heels remain in control. Luger then starts attacking Sir Mo, which gets the crowd whipped up. Mabel hits a belly to belly. The ref climbs back into the ring and does a very slow count. Diesel barely kicks out. Mabel goes to the second rope, misses the move. Diesel follows, hits a clothesline, and pins Mabel for the 3. Jeff.
My note on this is Bundy Hogan at WrestleMania 2, except imagine if Hogan wasn't over, Bundy didn't have Heenan to cut his promos, and they didn't have the smoke and mirrors of that big blue steel cage. This bout, for me, is the antithesis of what the new generation should be. And for a guy of Mabel's, let's call it girth, he moves around worse than most of the oldest guys in WCW right now. This type of match that Vince is trying to build up right here only works if you've got either a monster heel like, say, Vader, who the fans believe is a legitimate ass kicker, a legitimate world beater, a guy who can beat your babyface, or you've got a babyface that has a serious loyal traction with the fans whom they want to see slay the dragon. Neither was pleasant here. I thought the finish was a mess. When Luger runs down and then Diesel takes a shot at him, I'm like, wait, is he helping or hurting or what? It felt like a fumble. It felt confusing. It felt botched. I said, worst match of the card. And then in bold letters, I noted to myself, where are Davey and Owen? They teased Davey all night. His turn is one of the most, shocking might not be the word, but relevant of the last while. Yet he's a non-entity. And it's probably coming in with the best momentum to outright challenge Diesel going forward. And then you've got Owen Hart, who yet again, one of the top 3 workers in the company, is not on a pay-per-view, which is a painful oversight, underrate, give it, take it, whatever. I watched this match and I was like, it was under 10 minutes and yet it felt longer than the rest of the pay-per-view combined. Just garbage.
Tom.
I hated it. From the moment it started to the moment it finished, I hated it. I hated the positioning of it. I hated the feud, the story behind it. I felt almost. I went into the match thinking that I wasn't going to like it, and there was nothing in it that made me actually think, I could like this if I really wasn't so negative before I'd started watching it. There was a point in the match, and you mentioned it in the sort of description of the match, but when Mabel was literally sitting on Diesel's back, and
that looks so painful. Like Diesel's lying like face down on the mat, and Mabel just dropped all his weight on the base of his spine, and like nothing happened for about 30 seconds. That can't have ended well.
No, I know. And when he sat, which I thought looked painful, I thought, okay, he's gonna position this into a camel clutch. No, he just sat there. I stood up from my seat and I said, what is he doing? He looked like he was sort of trying to reach for a camel clutch, but couldn't quite be bothered enough to lean forward to actually get it locked in. So he was just sitting on top of him. And then after that, Diesel sort of rolled onto his side and Mabel sort of fell back like a baby who'd eaten too much food. It was just a calamity. And I agree with Jeff about the run-in from Lex. I thought, why? It was only when he was cleaning, when he Samo, you could see I think that was the reason why he came down, was to get rid of him. But it didn't make sense. And also I was thinking the exact same thing. I was thinking, why is Bulldog not here? We saw him earlier. What's he doing?
But Bulldog, apart from that picture-in-picture, doesn't appear on the show.
No, it's bizarre. It's really bizarre. It's almost like they had him booked to do something and then it didn't happen for whatever reason. And you would hope that was the reason, rather than just showing him just for the sake of showing him, turning up and looking like he means business and then just not appearing. I just think it was a huge mistake having this as the main event, and it really, really bothered me quite a bit. I really didn't like it.
Yeah, the Bulldog thing's really strange because not that you want to be doing this to your pay-per-view audience, but it's not like there's a TV show the following night where you can kind of create this hook. Oh, we still haven't heard from Bulldog. Will we hear from him on Monday Night Raw? You haven't got an episode of Raw for over 2 weeks. Like, if he appeared on the show, the only reason to do it would be to have a payoff to that or some kind of continuation of that angle. They didn't do it, so I can't really explain that. As the match itself, the best praise I can give it, honestly, I thought it was gonna be worse. That's probably the best thing I can say about it, is that it was still awful, but it didn't quite plumb the depths I was perhaps expecting. That's about as good as I can say. And, the near fall with the belly to belly was quite effective. But they're just killing Diesel here, Diesel, you put me in the ring with a guy you can't even hit his finisher on. So he has to hit this really, really strange kind of flying shoulder tackle / clothesline that doesn't look like it should keep Mabel down, but it does. Just bad. Just a real shit way of ending the show, and that's where we'll conclude it. So, Tom, we will come to your overall thoughts on the show and a score rating out of 10.
Yeah, overall, I was impressed with the show, as I said in my first piece. I thought that it started well, and it actually was consistently good and watchable through to the women's match, which I really had questions over. I thought that it had it had one excellent match, a couple of really good matches, and there was only one true stinker. And I thought the backstage stuff with the Dean was awkward, but then I liked the segment with Razer. I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that left me thinking, okay, I'd like to see where they go with this, because I know what both of them are capable of, and it was really sort of a nice teaser. So overall, the show gets a 6 from me, but that's hugely dragged down by the main event.
Jeff.
I'd almost echo that as 6. I thought Shawn Razor was excellent. I thought it was, I'd almost be as bold to say it was better than their first at WrestleMania 10. I enjoyed the opener. I enjoyed Horowitz and Skip. I even thought Helmsley and Bob Holly, for what it was serviceable. The tags with the smoking guns was good. I felt like I got my money's worth. So you know what? Let's just say 7. It's an average pay-per-view, that I enjoyed. And the reason it's a 7 and not I said I enjoyed it is because, as mentioned earlier, that main event stunk up the joint more than it should have. Ladder match should have gone last. I enjoyed it, but it could have been more enjoyable. So, and Bret deserves better.
Yeah, I'm with you on the 7 out of 10. You can't take the main event out of it, but if you do, this is actually a very good show. In terms of the one thing you can always say is, give me good in-ring action if you can't give me anything else. And prior to the main event, they did just that. And the fact that Shawn and Razor is just so exceptional that it will drag up any card. But yeah, there's no excuses for a main event that bad. I think that's, and we knew going in, it looked like it was going to shit up the place going in. We said it last month. You're going to do Mabel and Diesel. It's going to stink. And it did. And we talk about them correcting the card because, they thought, well, this is going to die a death on pay-per-view if we do Shawn and Sid and then Diesel and Mabel. The question is why did you only correct the one match? I don't know what you could have done given that you were kind of quite committed on the Mabel and Diesel front, but at the very least don't put it on last. At least if you have it on not last, you can put a lot more smoke and mirrors, maybe have it end in a nefarious way, and then you'd be alright. But I don't know. Anyway, we are going to lose Tom at this stage in the show because he's got to have dinner. That is quite important. So Tom, importantly, don't drop off the call at this stage. I'll cut you off like normal at the end of the part. But Tom, thank you very much for joining us for this bit of the show, and tell us where you can find us, where you can find you on Twitter.
Thanks to both of you. You can find me on Twitter on @MarkOutMartyn, and that's with a Y.
And what are you having for dinner, more importantly?
We're having burritos, so I am edging towards the door, literally, as I talk to you. Okay. I can smell them, and my hunger is exceptional.
Okay, alright, well, everyone listening now is really hungry. I'm really hungry, but me and Jeff have got the rest of the show to do. But thank you very much, Tom, and we'll be back after this, and we will be discussing all of the news and notes from WWF this month.
Beautiful. Hollywood. Land of the stars, the home place of the rich and the famous. A corner of the world in Southern California where dreams are made and lives are shattered. Many people have come into this magical town and made quite a name for themselves. You got Dean. And you got Bogart. And your Keck. Your Peck. Goldust. My favorite Marilyn Monroe. The Tinseltown roll call goes on and on and on. However, there is a difference between these stars and the legend. You see, these celluloid gods and goddesses were fabricated. They were cloned into stardom by teams of writers, producers, and directors. They learned. They spent many summer days in acting 101. That's the difference. And that is the difference. Look into my eyes. That is the difference between them and you see, I was born a star. It was a gift from that great one in the sky. No editing, just pure talent. Superstars of the World Wrestling Federation. Goldust comes onto the scene. You're going to realize quick. We're not in Kansas any longer. When I defeat your Diesel champion, and they put more gold around my waist, I'm going to invite you to be my personal guest at the biggest Hollywood premiere of your life. Oscar, step aside. Goldust. I'm talking hot. Is into the building.
And we come back, and Jeff, we'll discuss the promo we just heard, listening to the debut vignette of Goldust, aka real name Dustin Rhodes. You'll be able to talk about his kind of upbringing in WCW. But I will give them all the credit in the world. If their number one goal was to disassociate Dustin Rhodes from Dustin Rhodes, they did a very, very good job with this vignette.
I guess. At some points, it just feels like another rib on Dusty. I don't know. I think that Goldust...
Which bit of this is a rib?
a rib. We're taking your son, who's got a lot of talent, and we're going to make him into a homosexual film critic. And he's going to have a name that's partly homaging your old nickname of Stardust. And he's going to have all of these mannerisms that are just completely effete. And yet, you know, you've booked him in WCW for 5 years to be the natural, and now we're just gonna kibosh that, and we're gonna kind of just make him into this androgynous, controversial character, forgetting his work, forgetting everything he's done. It feels in part spiteful, in part controversy seeking. But if you look at all of the sponsors between Stridex, Acne Cream, or whatever it is, and, you know, all the toys and blah, blah, it just feels tone deaf for WWF to try to book a character like this at this time without coming across as exploitative.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I say, you know, why do you see it as a rib is that I've been under the impression, based on the reports that we have, that Dustin Rhodes had a fair amount of input into what he's doing at the moment, and also the fact that he kind of arrived at negotiations with the remit of, I don't want to be presented as the son of Dustin Rhodes. Now, yes, there is a far cry from not wanting to be presented as the son of Dusty Rhodes and whatever they've got here. But equally, I don't know how much of this gimmick was him and how much of it wasn't. It is part of the point I'd make. In terms of the character itself, I mean, you know, you can only judge so much from a couple of vignettes, and yes, it was quite strong. One thing I'm hearing is that the idea is that he's going to be quite effeminate out of the ring, but in the ring he's going to be quite vicious and quite violent, which I guess would be quite a nice contrast. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it kind of feels like a lot of gimmicks we've had where, you know, they'll come in, a couple of nice vignettes, and then they'll just sit in the mid-card. You know, Jean-Pierre Lafitte comes to mind, Waylon Mercy comes to mind, there are a lot of other names that fit in that category. Characters that come in like, this is a bit different, a bit out there, and then they never really develop it beyond the opening act. They never really get any further. And I think that's what they've got to do. I mean, Jeff, I guess the flip side of this question is, how effective would it have been in just bringing him in as Dustin Rhodes?
Well, I think earlier when I talked towards the smoking guns and the fact that cowboys in the northeast of the United States aren't necessarily prevalent, I think Dustin Rhodes is a talent enough to make something work. I think this gimmick of like a living Oscar statue, it's whether it's him trying to spite his father because of, you know, whatever relationship he has, he and his wife or whatever, and if you go back to, you know, him wanting to cut his own path in this business, I just think, let's play this. Of all the gimmicks you've seen in the last 5 years, I think Dustin Rhodes, if you wanted to show up like Bill Watts' kid as Techno Team 2000, you don't have to call him Dustin Rhodes. He could be Waylon Mercy, or he could be, Dustin Horowitz. I mean, there are so many different alternatives. This one seems specifically targeted and spiteful. I think Dustin can make it work because great talent can make a lot of things work, but I think he has to be committed to it. Otherwise, it's just a flash in the pan, and then he'll job to whoever in 2 months. Oh
yeah, if there's no conviction here, this will die a death. If he's not all in, this will die a death. If he's all in, it might still die a death. But yeah, as I say, I think that the question really is that if you'd have wanted to, because the one thing we can say about Dustin Rhodes in WCW is that he was, you know, reasonably popular. He was in that kind of level 2, level 3 tier of baby faces. Okay, it was a bit of a dry character, you know, the natural isn't really much of anything, and it perhaps lent on his dad's name a bit too much. You know, Dustin sounds a lot like Dusty. You know, so there's a bit, you know, it's almost, you know, even if it wasn't by design, it's almost like, well, you know, the names are a bit similar. But I kind of feel like there's moving away from the Dusty Rhodes name and the kind of quite obvious character. And then there's this, and I kind of feel like they've gone a long, long way, almost to the point where it might be quite difficult, to pull off. We'll move on. We'll discuss the other major character change. And in a way, you know, for a guy who's never played a heel before, something almost as significant, Jeff, the British Bulldog is now a heel. What do you think about that?
I love it. I love it. If you watch the old British Bulldogs tag team, Dynamite is this ferocious, furious, he's a wild man. He's doing these crazy bumps and he's going in there. But when times get tough, he tags in the muscle. And he was the anvil to Dynamite's Bret. And I think if you look at the good nature and the goodwill that Davey Boy has with the fans, by kiboshing that in one instance, he hotshots himself to the #1 contenders list as a heel, where they don't have a lot of them. If you watch that Mabel match and then you go, geez, am I going to pay for a pay-per-view with Mabel and Diesel or the British Bulldog and Diesel? Which one has more traction? And I just think Davey as a heel, now maybe he needs a mouthpiece, because
he's got Cornette, we think.
Yeah. So, you know, the charisma and the actual verbalization of things can be disseminated in various ways. But in ring, I think he's a solid to decent worker. He's got a great look. He's got, like, it's not like he's turned 20 times like Mr. Luger, where he was the narcissist, then he was an American patriot and whatever. This guy has shown you, look, fans, I love you. I'll do the vertical suplex. I'll do these things. I'm a member of the Hart family, and now he's a bad guy. I think there's length, especially if you want to go over and do European tours, whether as champion or challenger. Diesel versus Davey is a very interesting matchup, and I think there's a lot of potential there, man.
No, I wouldn't disagree with anything you said, in the sense that I kind of feel like Bulldog as a babyface was quite dry. It was kind of like, you know what you're going to get, but equally you don't feel like he's going to progress any further as a babyface. I agree with everything you say in terms of, you know, as a heel he has a lot of potential, but I guess my question, Jeff, is, of all the babyfaces on that roster, or, you know, scratch that, of all the guys on that roster, heels included, if you were going to elevate a heel into that spot or turn a guy into that spot, would Davey be near the top of your list? I don't think he'd be near mine.
No, I would have turned Razer. I would have had Razer win, and I think he's the total package. I think if you have Razer lay Diesel out with that, like, let's say Diesel does a 10 spot in the corner and Razer reverses it, Razor's edge, he wins the title. And they're friends, but they're not, and blah, blah, blah. I think Razor Ramon, with challengers like Diesel and Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart and The Undertaker, I think I just gave you a year-long's booking, which is short for me.
Yeah.
I think Razor Ramon, I think he checks every mark. I think he's the promo, the look, the good enough work to do it. He's a hell of an athlete. He looks excellent. He can talk. I mean, maybe you weighing down on that Scarface type gimmick with the accent, because we all know it's a worked accent. But I think with Razor, you have a viable, not just a #1 heel, but a #1 draw, which Diesel hasn't done. Otherwise, I mean, I think you just, yeah, Davey on the course they're going, I think he's their best alternative. I think within a year from now, you're going to see Razor Ramon drawing money as a heel champ.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, I just come back to the fact that, like, by all means turn Bulldog heel, but I wouldn't have turned him in the main event. It's like, you know, there's a dozen other guys I think I would have put him in front of him ahead of him in this spot. Shane Douglas probably one, although you might quite rightly argue it's probably too soon for him. Owen another, you know, Bret, Shawn, you know, there's a real long list of names here that I would have put in the main event before I think I would have turned Bulldog. But, you know, I think Bulldog's going to draw more money in a main event program as a heel than he would do as a babyface. So it's not the most horrendous thing. And Jeff, what do you think of the angle that did it? I mean, I'll give them that. I thought it was quite clever. You know, Bulldog comes out, Diesel's doing an in-ring interview. Bulldog says, you know, Luger's not here. Irony as he was. But Luger's not here. I need a tag partner to face Ben on a mission. And Diesel's like, well, I don't need an excuse to face Ben on a mission. We'll do it. And then Bulldog clotheslines Diesel and they do the post-match attack. I thought that was quite effective.
Yeah, I loved it. And surprisingly, I didn't see it coming because Davey has such that long tradition of being a good guy that when you watch that, you're like, you know what? Yeah. Let's see the tag guy, Luger, the Allied Powers, they've run their course, whatever, but man, if Luger's not there, imagine Diesel and Davey. Let's see them kick some bad guy ass. And then you watch the match and, Davey's got an ulterior motive here. And that, I enjoyed that. I thought, you know what? I mean, maybe I should have seen it coming, but I like Davey's such a good guy that when he does something bad, it's extra hurtful, and that works.
Yeah, tick in the box for what they did. I just feel like I'd have done it with 4 or 5 other people before I would have gotten the Bulldog. And the final discussion point this month really isn't about WWF, but we'll focus it on that because we have the upcoming debut of WCW Monday Nitro next week on Monday night, unopposed against WWF because WWF's preempted for all this week. So really, this question doesn't really apply for week 1, I suppose. Again, there's nothing they can do, and they are going to pre-tape the 11th of September edition of Monday Night Raw. But Jeff, I guess focusing less on just the first head-to-head and more just generally, do you think the WWF need to do anything massively differently is it, I'm kind of working on the opinion that it's really WCW's move to make first. And the WWF, for all their faults this year, their television has been pretty good. The ratings have been pretty good. And when they wanted to put on good matches, they've been able to do that. Do you think WWF need to change anything about their Raw product to potentially counteract what might come from Nitro?
Yes, I think there are 2 things. I think WCW right now is looking at, look, we have the money. So if we're going up against, let's say this is a city or a town or whatever, and the number 1 steakhouse in town is WWE. If I'm WCW right now, they've hired away the top chefs, and they've hired away the top servers, the top bartenders, and everybody, and they're making as good a food, or relatively speaking. If you're WWF and you're the big dog, if you're the number 1 steakhouse in town, what do you do when competition shows up? You change your menu. You go with what works, but you also have to introduce things that are going to be as popular as what works. So if you have Bret, Shawn, Taker, and let's say maybe Razer, you got to build more stars. And that's what Vince McMahon has always exceeded at, making new stars. Now what he has to do is he has to pivot and try not to make the same mistakes that he did earlier, as in Mabel or Sid and guys that maybe aren't as 90s-centric stars. But I think what Vince has to do is he's branded the new generation. That's a start. But he can't match Turner and WCW with stars. They have Hogan, they have Savage, they have Flair. They have these guys that are bona fide main eventers that can draw. So what they're going to have to do is show the fans, look, yeah, you can have this steak here or the steak across the street in WCW, but if you stay with us, you're going to get XYZ extra because we're proven, and here's our goodwill, and here's what we're going to show you. So I think when it looks like you have these new characters like 1, 2, 3 Kid, or he's not new, but younger characters, fresh, vibrant, new things. I mean, I'm comparing this obviously to the restaurant business. New flavors at first might not necessarily taste as good, but after a while, oh my God, this is new, this is different, this is something bold, this is something interesting. And then the thing that's old becomes old and boring and blah, blah, blah. I think their best bet, the WWF Monday Night Raw brand, is to say, we're the new generation, we are work rate, we are the best wrestling product, and we have the best wrestling promoter behind us.
Yeah, I can't massively disagree with that. I mean, I think the one thing on the work rate point is that as we discussed in, I wasn't really on it as well. We kind of discussed it last month as well, but I was mainly referring to the ECW show this month. WCW are bringing in Benoit, Guerrero, Malenko, Sabu. They're bringing in work rate names. So I think And part of it's WWF's own fault. They had Benoit on a trial a couple of months ago. They had a tryout match with Benoit against Bob Holly. They had him in there. By all accounts, they liked him. By all accounts, Benoit said, "No, I'm not going to give up Japan." And they said, "Right, well, we don't do that. We don't let people wrestle Japan and be in our thing." So that's their own fault. But WCW are going to throw work rate at them. I think what they've got to do is they've got to be aware of that. I don't think there's much they can do because, they just haven't signed Guerrero and Benoit and Malenko. But equally, I think they've got to say, okay, we need to put a bit more of a focus on Owen Hart, on the 1-2-3 Kid, on Hakushi, on the names we've got. Because the one thing that WWF, have been better at for the last, certainly in the couple of years I've been doing this product, is that they have been better at getting over unknown talent. WCW, in part because they haven't had to. WCW have been quite happy just to bring in existing names. But you look at a guy like Alex Wright, a guy like Brian Pillman, or a guy like Johnny B. Bad, a guy like Lord Stephen Regal, people like that. They're talented workers, but because they don't have name value, they're not really given that opportunity. Now, okay, Benoit to WCW doesn't have any name value, neither does Sabu. So it might be a case that they might change that, and I think Pillman is going to be on the opening show. But WCW at the bottom end probably has the better roster of workers, but they don't, or they haven't shown the capabilities of being able to get those guys over. If I'm the WWF, I'm like, look, to a point, I think we've got to say, we've got to stick with what made us so good. Their ratings have been good this year. They've had their faults, but their TV ratings have largely been pretty strong. And the expectation, I think, for a lot of people is that WCW will struggle for a long time against that, in the sense that they have this existing audience. They've had it for over 2 years on Monday nights. There isn't really a reason to believe that WCW is going to come in and take a significant chunk out of that, not early on. So I think to a point, you've just got to say, look, we know what we're good at. We've been doing this for a while. We've been creating good television that WCW haven't been able to do. And it's like, they've got these strengths. We can't really match that. They can't really do a lot about Hogan. Hogan's there. You can't create your own copy of Hogan. Right? They've got Luger, but we know how that failed. You can't do that. They've just got to focus on what they're good at, which has been creating compelling matches in main events that people want to watch on TV that doesn't cripple the other areas of their business. There is a thought that in the final 3 or 4 months of this year, we're going to see a much higher level of main event standard of wrestling. We may well do, but both companies are going to trade that off against, we've got to be able to put on good matches to counteract good matches that the other guys are doing, but equally we've got to be able to save matches that people are going to buy on pay-per-view. So there's that kind of trade-off as well. Jeff, any further comments?
Yeah, I think when it comes to Vince McMahon, I think he has to focus less on being paranoid about replicating the past. I just see King Mabel as King Kong Bundy or one of the many immobile dudes.
I don't think Mabel is anywhere close to Bundy.
No, but what I see there is I see Vince making a monster heel, giving him a SummerSlam main event and a King of the Ring based off of nothing but his look and his size. And I think if you go away from that and focus on developing stars like Vince did, I think the Randy Savage prototype in '86, a way you introduce somebody, develop them along, and then get the fans to get in, invested in them. That's the long-term yield. I think, I can pirate another sports team's star players, but if I'm not building my own roster with prospects, when those talents are past their prime, I'm screwed. And I think that's where Vince McMahon really has to look and say, okay, who are my diamonds in the rough? Who can I build? And if I'm watching SummerSlam, I go, well, the Hakushi Kid opening match, not main event, opening match. There are guys there that I think I could merchandise, I can sell. And I think if you combine Vince McMahon as the promoter with work rate, I think you have an unparalleled product, because as good as WCW's workers might be, they are missing the guy that made WrestleMania.
Well said. And that will bring a conclusion to this match.
What a finishing soundbite.
Yeah, well done. I was going to leave that a little bit longer. Perhaps I should have done. Firstly, thank you to Tom Martyn, who presumably is busy enjoying his burritos. And a very special thank you to Jeff Parker.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Jeff, you are on Twitter.
I am. I've tried to rename my Twitter account for a professional development type deal. It's at Jeff P. PRKE ER? I don't know. It's
That's not right, is it? Hang on, let me check that. That's not right. There's just one P, isn't there?
Well, the thing is, I don't want my business contacts to be able to look up all my wrestling nerddom, so I don't spell Parker as I did. But I've screwed it up, obviously.
Yes, you have. You blew your own promotion. It's Jeff Parker.
There you go. So,
there it is.
Thank you very much, Bob, my shameless self-promoting friend.
I love how that's the idea. That's the way of not being able to look you up, is just playing it Parker like that.
Well, yeah, I didn't want the A to be known, so I can get a job with the government.
But your Twitter name, the bit above your username, still says Jeff Parker, but you have at least capitalised the final R. So, that's going to fool them all. Jeff, thank you very much as always. You are going through a couple of very busy months with a thesis, that's right?
Yes, it is. But you know what? Honestly, if I could find 2 hours of a day to do this, I have so much fun talking with you guys. I can do my research, if it's 3 in the morning.
Who needs a thesis? Who needs work?
Who needs a degree and to pay bills? No, I would love to come back again, no matter earlier, sooner, whatever. It's not a problem. I love this, so it's really fun. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. We may not hear you for a couple of months, but I think we'll have we've got a seat warm for you at the end of the year. I think once all your stuff has blown over. Anyway, I have been Bob Bamber. You can find me on Twitter at Bobby Bamber. You can find the podcast on Twitter at Wrestling20YRS, Facebook.com/Wrestling20YRS, iTunes, RSS, Wrestling20YRS.com for all your blogs and getting back into the blogs more recently. And also, yes, just remind you of the parts of the show that you got coming up. Volume 2 is WCW, look at the Clash of the Champions. Volume 3, we start with me on the show with a bit of a knackered voice doing the IWA Japan King of the Deathmatch final, Terry Funk against Cactus Jack. Genuinely a lot of explosions, a lot of C4 and all of that. The final 3/4 of that show is Del, Tom and Kieran reviewing ECW. And Volume 4 is a special look at the New Japan Collision in Korea show, headlined by Ric Flair and Antonio Inoki in North Korea. A very historically significant show. The second half of that show, I think, is among the best things we've done for this podcast. Admittedly, that they did rely quite heavily on a massively in-depth Sports Illustrated article that we just picked apart. But I think that is well worth listening to. If you think I can skip that, if I were you, skip the show review, listen to the second half if you would otherwise skip it. But anyway, that's been that. I've been Bob Bamber. This has been Volume 1 of the August 1995 edition of the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. And until next time, goodbye.